Well, good evening and welcome. Nice to see you all. It's Wednesday night. Hmm. Beautiful, beautiful days here in Northern California. Uh, hmm. Well, I've been thinking today, and maybe this is a kind of segue into talking about Dogen and the Genjo koan, the koan of everyday life. I've been thinking about um, mental models, and maybe just a fancy word for how we think about things, but particularly, yeah. I mean, this is one of the things I notice. Uh, I notice in the whether it's the one-on-one coaching work that I do, or working with organizations, uh, or in the world of Zen, it's questioning um, our mental models. You know, one of the things I hear uh, working with organizations, well, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we've always done it is a sign to me that something really needs to change. Um, and of course, I can't help but notice it's interesting. It's a lot easier for us to see others' mental models, other people's, other organizations. Much harder is to see our own, my own. But I think that's part of. But maybe it can be a useful tool, you know, to see others. Today, I was having a conversation with some of the uh, senior people at the San Francisco Zen Center around question of diversity, and why is it so difficult to shift for this organization to have especially more diversity in their leadership, and I feel a lot of sincere aspiration and questioning, and I can also see the how hard it is to let go of old models. You know, that the model of training a Zen teacher in the San Francisco Zen Center model is that it's, you know, 20 years of practicing before you're even um, uh, you know, before you have the necessary kind of experience to be a Zen teacher. And I was pushing back and pushing back pretty hard, remembering that that I've actually done a fair amount of teacher training. You know, when I was running Search Inside Yourself, and one of the things that I discovered was that the main quality for teacher training was the life experience that the person brought with them when they showed up on day one, and that it's a funny mental model that it has to do with the training that you're going to provide them with. You know, it's just interesting to me to question these what our mental models are in organizations, in um, but coming back and maybe shining the light and the mirror on ourselves, on what our own models about who we think we are. What do we think we're doing? Uh, how do we think we are moving through this life? What are our models about how we look at our past, how we look at our future, how we view our what we're up to right now? So with that, I want to read this particular paragraph of Dogen's through the lens of that, I think perhaps what he's doing is questioning our mental models in this particular piece of writing. So I'll read it. He says, when a fish swims, no matter how far it swims, it doesn't reach the end of the water. When a bird flies, no matter how high it flies, it cannot reach the end of the sky. When the bird's need or the fish's need is great, the range is large. When the need is small, the range is small. In this way, each fish and each bird uses the whole of space and vigorously acts in every place. However, if a bird departs from the sky or a fish leaves the water, it immediately dies. We should know that for a fish, water is life. For a bird, sky is life. A bird is life. A fish is life. Life is a bird. Life is a fish. And we should go beyond this. There is practice enlightenment. This is the way of living beings. So, what the hell is Dogen talking about here? It's in some way, it seems very mysterious and ungraspable, and in some way, I think it's very poetic, and it's hard. I think it's hard for us to even grasp what Dogen's mental model is, right? So he's writing this, 13th century Japan, in this monastic life where I think everything, I think so much of his life and attention was around how to let go of our old mental models, how to find a way of being in the world that was an expression of real aliveness, freedom, awakening. This word, this combination of practice and realization. And I think I think these metaphors and this language he's using about birds and fish, perhaps what he's saying is one way that I look at it is we swim in the world of our relationships, that we can't, there's no escaping how related we are to each other, and that literally without these relationships, we would die. I remember, you've probably seen some of the studies, and it's funny, these studies were not done that long ago. I think in the maybe 1920s and 1930s, with psychologists wanting to see what would happen if, when monkeys were born, that they raised them without their parents, that they kind of isolated them, and they discovered that they died. That we humans literally would die if we weren't touched, if we weren't being nurtured by other human beings as infants. And perhaps that what he's saying, that if a fish leaves the water or a bird leaves the sky, they will die. And I think if we that we somehow need to completely enter our own interdependence. So of course, it's interesting that so much of this practice is what looks like sitting by yourself, and it is, right? So it is. We do in this Zen tradition. There is a lot of emphasis on independence and sitting by yourself, studying the self and going beyond the self. But it's all done in the context of interdependence, of that, how much of our lives is interdependent and working and living with other people. And I think so somehow this cultivation of this mental model of that we are independent, we are alone, we're born alone and we'll die alone, and we are born completely dependent on others, and we will die completely dependent on others. And our life and this practice is so much a practice of compassion, practice of that we, and especially the the vow of the bodhisattva, of the Buddhist practitioner, right? That beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. And even this, there's a certain mental model about living from these vows, as opposed to living just for ourselves in some way. So that, again, I think there's these mental models at various levels about being independent and dependent, living our lives to help others, living our lives to find real freedom. And these last couple sentences where he says, we should know that for a fish, water is life. For a bird, sky is life. So it's interesting that, fish aren't, they're not aware of the water, but there's this oneness of fish and water. For a bird is not aware that it's in the sky, but for the bird, a bird is life, a fish is life. And we should go beyond this somehow, that we are independent, we are dependent, and when we go beyond this is, I think, what Dogen is saying is practice and enlightenment. This is the way of living beings. So much of Dogen's mental model is this paradox that just to practice, just this sincere effort to be ourselves is itself enlightenment, is itself awakening. And it's funny, I was laughing at myself. I wasn't thinking about, maybe I was unconsciously thinking about this piece of writing when we started our meditation earlier, and what came up for me was this expression, like a fish in a puddle, what pleasure is there here? This is this line is from a ceremony that happens in Zen monasteries. Every fifth day is a day off, and every fifth day there's a day before day off, and there's a ceremony that I distinctly remember being boring and uncomfortable, and and this line would be chanted in the midst of this very boring, long, standing around ceremony, and like a fish in a puddle, what pleasure is there here? And it would always kind of reset my own noticing my discomfort and boredom, and to some degree aspiring to let it go and be that fish in a puddle. And maybe beyond all of these various complex ideas and metaphors that Dogen is presenting here, if all you get from this is like a fish in a puddle, what pleasure is there here? I think that's enough, more than enough. So let's get into maybe get into twos or threes, and the suggested topic is around mental models. And how is it for you to question your own mental models, the way in which you provide context for maybe who you are or what you're doing? Yeah, how does it strike you, or what do you make of this, like a fish in a puddle? What pleasure is there here? Or anything else you want to talk about? Yeah, so maybe what I'd suggest is maybe three minutes for each person, and then another few minutes just to do some debriefing. Yeah, again, questioning this topic. What do you make of this topic of mental models and how that works for you, or like a fish in a puddle, how that sits for you, or anything else you want to talk about with your partner. And then we'll come back.